focus is on recreational activities which are happening in the vicinity of these habitats, and what we can do to help mitigate any impacts that these activities have on the habitats. Next slide, please. So this is the project partnership. It's made up of 6 organisations and led by Natural England. It's funded by LIFE, which is the European Union's funding instrument for the environment and climate action. The programme supports Natura 2000, which aims to ensure the long-term survival of Europe's most valuable and threatened species and habitats listed under both the Birds Directive and Habitats Directive. Natural England is providing all of the project management, finance and admin support, bringing the partners all together, making sure the project fulfills its goals. Then the RYA and Green Blue is playing a key role in raising awareness within the boating community, highlighting the importance of protecting the seabed habitats, advising boaters on how their methods, particularly anchoring and mooring, can help preserve and restore, enhance these important habitats. Then there's the Marine Conservation Society, which is also helping to enhance technologies available to reduce the damage on seagrass beds whilst sowing new seagrass beds in the right places. They're also focusing on education alongside the Ocean Conservation Trust, and who's also carrying out on the ground restoration of seagrass beds, and engaging and outreaching with lots of different members of the public, schools and communities to inspire them to take better care of the marine environment. Then we've got Plymouth City Council, which hosts the Tamar Estuaries Consultative Forum, which is the last 2 logos on the right hand side there, and that's their role is to coordinate and liaise with all the partners and stakeholders and local communities, and ensure that the ReMEDIES project is heard across Plymouth as a city, and they're doing that through like educational roadshows, information boards, guides, leading on survey and engagement activities to encourage responsible use of the marine environment. Next slide, please. So why do we care about these habitats? What makes them so important? So Natural England has been surveying and monitoring these sites ever since they were designated, and unfortunately at present they are in unfavourable condition due to a number of impacts and pressures. Unfavourable condition in this context means that special features such as seagrass beds are not being conserved or are being lost, and so without the appropriate management, the site may not reach a favourable or recovering condition. They have seen a significant long-term reduction in seagrass extent and quality, with research showing at least 44% of the UK's seagrass has been lost since 1936, which is almost half, which is devastating. Recreational activities are one of the threats which are contributing to disturbance to the seabed, and every additional impact increases the pressure on these, which is why the project is so important. Next slide, please. So this is a map of showing the full extent of the Fal and Helford SAC. So you can see the hatched area in purple is the full extent, and then the little green areas are the seagrass beds which have been monitored in the SAC. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've covered a little bit about the project. The next part of the webinar is looking at the importance of seabed habitats such as Maerl and seagrass and the threats to it. And I'm going to pass you over to Ruth, my colleague, to explain these. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. If everyone doesn't mind, I might just have to take my camera off because I can't bear to see myself talking in the corner. It definitely puts me off. So what is Maerl? Maerl's a red seaweed. It forms calcium carbonate skeleton. It's got a limited distribution across the UK and found mainly in Scotland, but there is some in the Fal and Helford, which is great. And it grows into a sort of 3D layers up to a sort of maximum depth of about 20 centimetres, but it's very, very slow growing, about 1 millimetre a year. So because it's slow growing, it's also slow to recover from any impacts. It's very fragile, so it is vulnerable to impacts or disturbance. And it's an important nursery ground for bivalves such as scallops, sea cucumbers, anemones and other small creatures. Next slide, please. What is seagrass? It's our only flowering plant in the ocean. Because it needs light to photosynthesize, it's usually found in shallow waters. And it's an amazing habitat which is provides shelter for nursery for marine species such as fish, cuttlefish. Next slide, please. We can show some of the interesting. Oh no, sorry. Sorry. This is showing where the seagrass beds and the Maerl habitat is using the DEFRA magic online magic map. Next slide, please. Yeah, so seagrass. So we've got cuttlefish, stalk jellyfish, seahorses, and it provides for the shelter for the life cycle for about 70% of the commercial fisheries. It stabilises sediments, so it provides a natural defence against erosion and contributes to carbon sequestration. It captures atmospheric carbon 35 times faster than terrestrial systems such as forests, and accounts for 10% of the ocean's capacity to store carbon, despite actually only occupying 0.2% of the ocean floor. The roots contain bacteria within the rhizomes, and that's a nitrogen fixer, which means that that's locking away nitrogen in the sediments, and that encourages and improves water quality. As I said, it's a sheltered habitat for a variety of animals, particularly important for commercial fishing species, and for coastal protection, protects from erosion by absorbing wave energy, and binds the sediments. Next slide, please. So what are the threats to the seabed habitats, such for something like seagrass? Climate change is obviously causing increasing extreme events such as storms and runoff from the land. Runoff from the land, especially around agriculture, increases the nutrients in the water. And obviously these two effects together impact on the seagrass so that it overwhelms the seagrass. That would then mean there's less nursery habitat for the commercial species of fish. And on top of all of this, any recreational activities might damage the seagrass, which then shows that it's not so resilient. So the damage that we're looking at today is from the traditional anchoring and mooring. So next slide, please. So a couple of pictures here of anchor drag and chain abrasion, and as you can see, it's taking out the roots, the rhizomes of the seagrass, which is leaving bare patches. And this means that the bed gets broken up, and as I say, is not so resilient. It doesn't grow back so well. Next slide, please. A traditional swing mooring braids a circle around as the tide and wind bring the boats around. You can see a picture of it's the Isles of Scilly. Actually, you can see the circles that are being made within the seagrass beds there. And as I say, it nibbles away at the edges and then makes that seagrass bed less resilient. Next slide, please. So we've got some video that was shot by Chris Cooling in Osborne Bay, just to show the traditional mooring with the anchor chain, a large mooring block on the seabed floor, and the effects around this large block and chain. And you can see that there's very bare patches, a bit like the grass when you're walking on it, and if you keep walking on it, then eventually it takes the roots away, and there's no chance of it growing back. And this is panning out to show the impact of that chain that's been going round and round in a circle and abrading the bed. And then suddenly you can see there's a wall of seagrass at the end of that chain. So there's an obvious impact from that mooring, and this is what we're going to talk about next. Looking at the best practice and the use of advanced mooring systems. I'll hand over to Kate Fortnam from the RYA in Green Blue, the environmental sector. Thank you, Kate.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Yeah, it's amazing, that footage, isn't it, of just seeing the kind of damage and kind of bringing what's out of sight to the forefront of our minds. I think as boaters, we're out on the water, and it's very difficult to get an idea of what's going on underneath, and the impact we're having isn't always really visible to us. So hopefully by having these videos and showing you, it kind of brings that to life and explains a little bit more. But it's definitely good evidence to show the impacts that the moorings and anchoring has. So as boaters, we obviously love to visit these beautiful places along our coastline. Fal and Helford area has been obviously really popular over the COVID period, and more people using the site. And I think if we want to continue to visit these places, we want to ensure that we can protect them. So what can we do as boaters to minimise that impact? So the first thing the RWA and the Green Blue have developed for the ReMEDIES project is we've developed a guide on anchoring and moorings. So this guide can be downloaded from the Green Blue website, so you can download that and go through, and it gives you the anchoring techniques step by step and an introduction to the advanced mooring systems. It can also be ordered in hard copy, so you can get a hard copy posted out to you for free. If you work at a training centre, RWA training centre, if you're a member of a club, then you can order a batch of those to distribute amongst members. And if you're an RWA instructor, then you can order a batch of these. And when you're doing your RWA courses covering anchoring and mooring, but even landing and launching vessels such as dinghies and windsurfers from the beach, it will give a little bit of best practice that you can pass on to your students. And that's what the RWA really wants to encourage instructors to do. You will see in the chat towards the beginning, there is a link to that anchoring and mooring guide. So if you do want to access that now, you can click on that and go through to the Green Blue website. So in terms of boating, what's the first thing really that we need to identify is where is the seagrass? If we're going to make an educated choice on not anchoring in it or avoiding anchoring in it, we need to know the location. So the first thing the project's been looking at is trying to draw up maps and support the recreational boating community in identifying where they are. So on the ReMEDIES website, which is Save Our Seabed, there are maps of the sites that you can view. The RWA is also developing maps using its own atlas. So you can see here one of the example sites. So we've got here the Fal and Helford, and my colleagues at the RWA have been mapping out the seagrass areas on here. What we're looking to do with this data is put this onto nautical charts, and we're looking at having signage at marinas and posters at clubs that can be put up, so boat users understand where it is and have a bit more of a sense before choosing an anchorage location or choosing a place where they may want to land or launch their vessel from. Other things the project's looking at is putting marker buoys on the surface of the water. So if we don't have access to these maps, at least when we're approaching an area, we can have an idea of where the seagrass boundary is. So these marker buoys have been really valuable, and actually from the project there has been some voluntary no anchors anchor zones put up. One is Jenny Cliff in Plymouth Sound, and what they're noticing there is boaters aren't going into the area and are actually reading the signage and understanding that. When I was down there at the Sail GP event in the summer, we were out on the boat and we actually noticed boaters getting into their tenders, going up to the markers, having a look, and no one was going in there. And it was really good seamanship to see boaters actually kind of warning other boaters and saying, well, actually, this is a voluntary no anchor zone. Would you mind moving out of the area and anchoring just outside, and kind of sharing that knowledge and informing each other. And I think that's really, really powerful. Later on, Esther's going to show you some marker buoys that have actually been put down in Falmouth Harbour. We've got Vicky Spooner, I see, who's joining us on the webinar from Falmouth Harbour Commissioners, and they've put in a couple of markers down there, and it is fascinating to see the impact that has had visually. So the other thing we've been doing is working with IMRE Publications and looking at getting the seagrass layers put into their pilotage books, but also their paper charts, because these are things that boaters are using already. We want to make it easy, we want to make it simple. The other obvious thing is putting it into digital chart software, which we use on our vessels. And this is an area that we are definitely looking into. The software companies are interested in this. The Hydrographic Office usually provide the data that goes onto those software charts. They've said to us at the moment they will only be putting on the main marine protected areas, which they already provide to software companies as a layer, and only things that are going to disrupt navigation. So as a project, we now need to be looking at who's going to administrate providing that seagrass data to the software companies. So that's something the project is going to be looking at over the next year. So now we know where we can look up the seagrass. So on the ReMEDIES website, you can look at the 5 sites and where the seagrass is there. You know where it is, and then you need to think about, okay, can I anchor away from those areas or use a mooring outside? So that's your first thing that you need to focus on. If you're in the seagrass area and you haven't got an option of mooring away or anchoring away, then recommend using an existing mooring in that site. And even better, if there's an advanced mooring system available, which I'm going to explain what those are shortly, then please use one of those because they have less impact on the seabed than our traditional swing moorings. And the project's looking at putting more of those into these sites, trialling them and seeing how effective they are. Now, last resort. If you have to anchor in a seagrass area because of safety reasons or the weather's changed and you need to go into that area, hence why voluntary no anchor zones are really important. It's allowing us to know where the sites are, but it's giving us the option to use them as boaters because some sites are important for our safety. And if that's the case, then there's small anchoring techniques that we can adopt. So the first thing is using an anchor that's suitable for sand. This is where seagrass will grow in that type of sediment, to minimise drag. Making sure that we're checking the positioning of our vessel once the anchor has got hold of into the seabed to make sure again that drag isn't occurring. And if you've been on an RWA course, you'll know that all the steps taken to secure your vessel to stop it moving actually has a secondary benefit in protecting the seabed because you're stopping that anchor dragging through and ripping up the roots. The next thing is the chain length on your anchor. So as part of RWA recommendations, depending on where you're anchoring, you usually use 4 times amount of chain for the maximum depth of water in that location. If it's a mixture of chain, line and warp, then it's 6 times the maximum depth of chain that you're going to deploy out. Now, it's really important to keep this as accurate as you can. So you can see the chap on the front on the bow of the boat here. Usually if you've got an automatic anchor deploy, you can actually measure the exact amount of meters of chain that you're deploying. If you've got crew on the foredeck, then it is really useful to mark out your chain so you know how many meters are going along it, and then the crew can count how many meters are going out. Why is it so important to get that accuracy in meters? Looking at circumference area, so we've got a diagram here. For example, if there's 6 meters of chain lying on the seabed and you have the anchor point, which is the blue dot here, and the vessel pivots 360 degrees around in the wind, so this is the maximum potential that it could, then you're looking at 113 meters squared impact chain abrasion. Now let's add on a couple of extra meters of chain length just to make sure the vessel's secure, just in case. So let's add on those 2 extra meters. 2 extra meters lying on the seabed. Circumference area goes up to 101 meters squared, so nearly double just by adding 2 extra meters on. So small changes we can keeping the chain to a minimum to keep our vessel safe can actually have huge positive impacts on the seabed. And if, as boaters, we can start adopting this, it means that we can continue accessing these beautiful locations that we like to go and visit. Otherwise, unfortunately, it does go down that route where we have the potential of a no anchor zone. So what we need to be doing as a boating community is finding solutions and making those changes and adopting them. So advanced mooring systems. So we've looked at anchoring and what we can do there, avoiding going into these areas. But what are the other things that we can tackle in terms of the impacts those traditional swing moorings were having? So just to give you a recap, this is a traditional swing mooring. We've got the anchor block here, which is taking up a lot of space on the seabed as it is, where seagrass or any other habitat can't grow. You then got the chain, and as the boat pivots around the anchor, you've got this abrasion. So one, how can we adjust the mooring block, and how can we maybe remove the chain? So option 1 that the project is looking at is replacing the anchor block with what we call a helical screw. So the diagram shows you the helical screw going into the seabed, and on the right hand side we have a full advanced mooring system. So if you haven't seen one in real life, this is what one looks like out on the shore. So you've got the helical screw, that's about a 2 meter length helical screw, you can see there, but essentially that gets drilled down into the seabed and it measures the torque that goes down, and actually the accuracy of the weight that it can hold is a lot more accurate than a large mooring block. This typically can hold a weight of 10 to 15 tons once that 2 meter helical screw has gone into the seabed. So it's quite an accurate measurement. So if you're concerned about whether your vessel weight is going to be held on these, then it's pretty secure. A friend of mine recently has a mooring down in Falmouth actually, and the recent storms that we had, their mooring block moved a significant distance along the seabed, and it caused actually their vessel to collide with another vessel, and that's looking at your traditional moorings, whereas this is pretty fixed into the seabed. And you can see in the diagram it has minimal coverage of area, the actual anchor, so it's allowing seagrass to go around it. The next thing is the chain. We're replacing that with an elastic riser. There's 2 companies that we're working with that provide that. We have Hazelet Marine, and in the photograph here you can see their kind of rubber band. So this advanced mooring system is actually being used in Studland Bay at the moment, and has been put in 11 of them by Boatfolk, the Marina chain. So that just gives you an idea of the full extent, and they flex with the movement of the tide and the boat going around to take that kind of snatching point off the bow of the boat. And Seaflex is our other company that we're working with, and they actually make moorings for floating restaurants, hotels. They're pretty secure, and Maerl Yacht Club, I believe, have those attached to their pontoon. So just give me an example what a helical screw looks like as it's getting embedded into the seabed. So it's quite fascinating to see how they actually do it. So as we go through the image here, we have a diver with a piece of equipment that attaches onto that helical screw. So the equipment is attached to a vessel on the surface to power it, but essentially in the middle it rotates the helical screw to drive it into the seabed, and the diver has to hold it up vertically. And I think he's getting a little bit of support by a balloon or a floating device just above his head, just out of shot. So you can see there's a little bit of debris that comes up initially as it's getting screwed into the seabed, but you can see the mechanism working here. It's pretty fascinating how this is done. They used to do it, there is the option of doing it straight from a boat, but this one allows them to get into different areas, and it makes it easy to actually extract the helical screws for maintenance and replacement as well. So I'm just going to move the shot along just to give you an idea of what's left over once. So here you can see the top of the helical screw, no large anchor block. You've got the shackle here, which eventually the riser attaches to, and that will pivot and rotate around the top of the helical screw there. So once that's in, anything pulling on that can take 10 to 15 tons of weight. There you go, job done. So seagrass can grow around it. So Seaflex, we haven't got one of a mooring, but we've got one of a pontoon to give you a visual representation. So pontoon, and with the Seaflex, it uses the helical screw into the seabed again. It's an elastic riser, and with pontoons, they position a variety of them to secure the pontoon to stop it moving around. But the actual Seaflex will flex, as you can see in the shot here, to allow for the rise in sea level. And these devices are made bespoke for the conditions of the site. So it does tend to mean they're a little bit more expensive from these companies, but they can ensure in terms of tidal, the conditions, the sediment, that they're designed specifically for that mooring. So lifting that chain off, I'm just going to move the shot along. It'll take you in on a zoom so you can see it a little bit closer. So you can see how it's flexing here with the change. Now, obviously, if you're going to put out a field of moorings using these devices, you need to have most of the field using the same, because the boats are going to be moving differently to a traditional swing mooring. The other option, so we looked at their helical screw and an elastic riser, 2 companies. Another option is actually attaching floats to the chain, and this is called a Sterling mooring, and these are actually found in Cornwall Bay in Plymouth, and I believe this is the one, the type of mooring system that is being used for the marker buoys at Flushing, that we went and visited with Vicky from the harbour commissioners down there. So just to give you an idea of the visuals here, the floats are attached to the chain, and it may look like they're attached at random points, but they're actually positioned periodically in a method that allows the chain to gradually go up through the water column. So this is a slightly cheaper option, obviously, for an advanced mooring system. So if you've got your own personal mooring, this might be something you might be willing to invest in. But the project's very much working with harbour authorities and marinas to look at where traditional moorings can be replaced. And then the project's trialling these. Okay, so I've gone over some anchoring best practice and advanced mooring systems, and now I'm going to pass you over to Esther, who is going to give you a bit more of what's going on with the project in the Falmouth and Helford area. So over to you, Esther.
Thanks, Kate. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's been going on in the Fal and Helford with the ReMEDIES project? So this is again the map of the area showing the special area of conservation and the seagrass areas in green. Most of the SAC is fringed by sheltered intertidal sand flats and mud flats, which are crucial for sediment dwelling species and communities, and providing a home and food source for a wide variety of invertebrate and bird species. In the lower Fal and Falmouth Bay, extensive beds of the coralline red algae, free-living Maerl, support high diversity of flora and fauna, including large numbers of thornback rays and other priority habitats. include seagrass beds and circle littoral reef. So in the Helford, on the north side of the Helford River, just off Grebe Beach, there is a voluntary no anchor zone known as VNAZ, VNAZ, which has been in place for approximately 10 years. As a consequence, the seagrass is very healthy and dense, with fronds of up to 1 metre in length and some even longer, and at a depth of about 6.5 metres. In contrast, outside of the voluntary no anchor zone to the south, the seabed consists of fine sand with peacock worms and no seagrass. We're very lucky to have Sue Scott, the estuaries officer at Cornwall Council, and her amazing volunteer team who patrol the area in their patrol boat. They've been working really hard at informing and helping people make decisions about where they go in their boats. They've been talking to people whilst out on the boat about the no anchor zone, providing advice on where to stop, and chatting to anyone who is just in the area who is interested, and anyone who might anchor in the VNAZ, and letting them know about why it's important to avoid the seagrass in order to protect it. So we are working alongside the team to add 2 additional no anchor marker buoys to reinforce the area. So the map you can see on this slide shows the rough outline of the seagrass bed there in blue. The 3 crosses to the right are the current marker buoys, and we've had a recent survey done which shows the seagrass bed has changed shape and extended a little bit. So we are putting in 2 extra no anchor marker buoys to reinforce that no anchor zone around the seagrass bed. We're working with the Fal and Helford SAC Management Forum to support the installation of AMS visitor moorings and trials as well. Next slide, please. So here you can see a photograph on the left-hand side of some sailing boats mooring successfully outside of the voluntary no anchor zone. On the right-hand side, and then the middle image is of a diagram of another example of an advanced mooring system, which is being used in the Fal and Helford, developed by Moorings Limited, and is currently being known as the Port Notice AMS. The photo on the right is of some maintenance work being carried out on the marker buoys by the same company based in the area. Next slide, please. So other positive collective projects going on include one by the Falmouth Harbour Commissioners, who put in advanced mooring system marker buoys last year at Flushing, which has been very successful in helping people make educated choices about where to anchor around the seagrass bed, and providing the community with information about the seagrass itself. In addition, but unintentionally, it has created an unofficial safe spot for recreational swimming, so that's really great as well. Another is the St Maur's Trial speed limit buoys, marking the speed area at the entrance to the harbour, protecting the seagrass at St Maur's, which is home to substantial beds. This was commissioned by Cornwall Council and funded by the Fal and Helford Development Levy, which has suspended chain moorings designed and built and then tested on how they functioned. So the next steps are to install interpretation panels to inform the general public and other users of the the SAC about advanced mooring systems and seagrass beds. So the project, the ReMEDIES project, is continuing for another 2 years, so keep an eye out on our website and on our social media pages to keep up to date with what we're doing. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Esther, for the local information. So we're drawing an end to the webinar now, but just to recap what we've gone through. So we've done an introduction to the LIFE Recreation ReMEDIES Project, so hopefully you know a little bit more about that. If you want to delve into more, then please go and visit the website. There's research papers on there, there's information about each of the sites, what the projects are doing, and if you want to get involved in the project and volunteer, there is seagrass bagging going on that with the Ocean Conservation Trust at Plymouth National Marine Aquarium, and there's also going to be some next year in the Southampton area where you can volunteer and get involved in creating those, and they will be deployed to restore seagrass. There's also other volunteer opportunities to do outreach and go and visit boating clubs and do talks or attend events with us, so boating events to talk about the project. We then looked at the importance of seagrass beds and also Maerl, which is the only site out of the 5 that exists in your area here, so that's really exciting and a new habitat to learn about. And then we looked at the types of threats, and not just from recreational but the wider threats, and again this webinar is particularly looking at recreational boating. There is other outreach work going on in terms of the other types of recreational impacts such as dog walking, or general walking along the foreshore where seagrass can be exposed, and also bait digging, etc. And then I covered the anchoring best practice and advanced mooring systems, so hopefully you've got a bit of information about that as well. And then we had the site overview. So we now got an opportunity for Q&A, so please type in any of your questions, and this is a time when I want to introduce the survey. So the survey literally takes about 3 to 5 minutes, and there is a prize draw involved. So it will be a £50 voucher, and that will be either to spend on Amazon or at a recreational boating outlet. So if you want to be in with a chance of getting that in January, then do complete the survey, and I will put a link into that now into the chat that you can click on. Okay, so any questions, do type them into the chat and we will pick them up. And just to give you an idea of the survey, I'm just going to share it with you on my screen, so you've got an idea of what's involved. But it's an opportunity really for you to also sign up to the newsletter for ReMEDIES, so you know what future webinars are coming up and get up-to-date information. And there's also a comments box in there, so if you've got anything additional that you want to communicate to the project, then that is your opportunity to do that as well. I'm just going to come off the main slide, but do click on that little mini survey, which the link should be in the chat now, so you can kind of go through that. It's quite quick to go through, and if you're not a participant in recreational boating, it will be even quicker because some of the questions will be taken away. Okay, so you should see the survey coming up. So when you click on the link, you'll come up with the survey here. So you've got an opportunity to enter the prize draw and also receive some information from the ReMEDIES project by entering your name and your email. So we need that in order to contact you. If you don't put it in there, obviously it's anonymous, this survey. But you've literally got similar questions that we asked you at the beginning of the webinar. A little bit about where you operate your vessel or craft, so whether you actually do that in any of our 5 sites or elsewhere. Then we just got a few questions about what you've become more aware of during the webinar, and then also what will you look to go away and do now in terms of best practice. Are you likely to go and adopt some of the techniques and practice that we've shared with you? And then are you going to share that potentially with others as well, because the best thing is word of mouth and talking about these things. And if we're demonstrating best practice out on the water, and as we've seen when we've been out where the marker buoys are, what we tend to find is other boaters start to follow. And then there's just an opportunity to write some of the questions in here. If you are an RWA instructor, there's a specific question for you on whether you're likely to embed any of the learning from the webinar into your courses. So we very much value you completing the survey. And like I said, please enter your details at the beginning if you want to go into the prize draw. So have we got any questions?
Yeah, we've got one from George. How often do the helical screws need to be checked or removed for maintenance?
Yeah, so they get checked annually. And in terms of maintenance, they'll check the shackles, and if there's any wear and tear, if it doesn't look like it was originally, then they will replace it. But it's quite easy to extract out of the sediment to assess the rest of it. But usually most of the wear and tear will happen around the shackle joint, and then that can be easily assessed by a diver. But it is quite easy to maintain. What we find with some of the larger boats is hauling these massive anchor blocks out of the water can be a bit of a pain and difficult, and the risers as well can be checked annually, and obviously if there's anything different from when it was originally put in, then adjustments can be made. I think these helical screws are really good, especially in sites where you've got intertidal zones where the seagrass becomes exposed, because some places I know in Wales will have tractors which go out across the seagrass to pick up the anchor blocks and bring them in over the winter period. But they need those big tractors to pick up the weight of these blocks, and the tractor wheels themselves are causing damage. So it's quite interesting to look at that aspect as well.
Thanks, Kate. We've got two more questions. One from Kaya. I've seen lots of sailors ignoring the signs on the Helford. Is this on purpose or is it through ignorance? Good question.
I don't think we'll be able to answer that representing them, but maybe there's someone on the line that is one of those boaters that would like to share the reason why. It may be because, you know, they traditionally go there, and it may be, you know, that they're not aware of the project, they're not aware of the importance of seagrass, and this is why doing these webinars and hopefully communicating this more, we're going to build a bit more education around it, and therefore people are going to actively make that choice themselves with that understanding. The other thing is it may be a safety reason that they need to go in there and use that at that particular time.
Luckily, Sue's got on and she says she's can answer that question, which is great. I was hoping she would. There you go for it, Sue. Thank you.
Are we able to unmute her?
Yes.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So you just need to click unmute yourself, possibly.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Since we've been out on the estuary patrol boat, it's quite easy to get answers from people. I have had the excuse of a yachtsman with coffee cup in hand saying, well, actually, I've just got some seaweed around my prop, and when I finish my coffee, I'll move. But the majority of people still slip through without seeing the signs. There's a lot of local knowledge about it, and we don't seem to see, in the early days of having it, we definitely had people that had entrenched habits, but we don't seem to see those anymore. There's a lot of local buy-in now, but it is still easy to slide in, and you can have 16 boats or so anchored outside, and one will go in and they'll be sat right there in the middle, and I don't know why they don't look around them and think why nobody else is anchoring in there. But if you go up and actually speak to them, they usually say, oh, I haven't seen the sign, and they will pick up and move. So that's pretty much, I mean, it's on the, I know it's on Navionics and some of the other charts, the digital charts already. So I don't know why they don't look at that. Or of course, it could be the answer to us, you know, we're there facing them, asking them if they'd like to move and have they seen the sign, and I suppose their easiest answer is no, I haven't seen it. So there we go. It's just one of those things, but you get the mad weekends, whether it's St Maur's or in the Helford, are always the bank holiday weekends, and that's where you get a lot of people out doing things that they wouldn't normally do. Does that help, or does anyone need any more?
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Thank you, Sue. So it's a bit of both, we think. Yeah, thank you. Great. Okay, so we have got one more question. Oh no, we've got 2 more questions. One from Katie. Thanks, Kate. Really informative. What sort of monitoring are the GB Natural England doing post installation of these novel moorings? For example, is monitoring only for the recovery of seagrass, or is it also looking at the associated marine community?
I expect I could answer that one. Yeah, I mean, obviously, yes, we're looking at the seagrass to see if there's evaluate the different types of mooring systems, and there will also be some looking at the species as well. I think Sea Search have done some baseline surveys of many of the beds, so we've got some of that detail, and so yeah, we'll be building on that. I mean, obviously it's good to get the moorings in, but the most important thing is to evaluate them and monitor them to see how effective they are, and that's, you know, the biggest part of the project, really. You know, because what we want to do is to show that these are effective and that they are useful. So yeah, both counts as well, and also how happy people are using them.
Great, thank you, Ruth. Okay, one more question. Is it okay to copy and print the habitat maps from the Save Our Seabed site, especially to use during RYA courses? Question for you, Kate.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely encourage using the maps. The advanced mooring guide that we've produced doesn't have the maps in for each of the sites, so definitely go to the website, have a look at those, download the maps. We will be getting nautical charts in the new year, so please keep revisiting. If you go on the survey, sign up to the ReMEDIES newsletter, then you will be informed when these resources come out. And obviously the green blue as well, we have our own social media newsletter, and we will announce that, and that's the best way to get those updates. But really recommending instructors, one, read the guide, build up your own knowledge, and then as you're talking about anchoring deployment, you can naturally start talking about the secondary benefits of preventing anchor drag and the amount of chain within that conversation, rather than a kind of add-on at the end of your course. So the RWA is very much for embedding environmental messaging into your courses as you go along, for sure. And if you need any support, please contact me at the Green Blue, and our environment team at the RWA will be happy to support you.
Great. Okay, I can see we've got 1 minute left in the allocated time. Looking through the messages, I think there's just one comment from Jane. The marker buoys are so small and white, so often not easy to read. Did anyone want to say anything about that?
I did a bit of a feedback there. Yeah, it's great to hear about these comments. If you've got comments, feeding that back to us. It's an ongoing project. It finishes in 2025, but the whole process is monitoring, learning about advanced mooring systems, learning about how we're marking them, what would be useful for recreational boaters, because at the end of the day, we want to make them work. And it's not, this is the systems we're using, we're putting them in. It's all about monitoring and trialing these. And if you've done the survey, please add in any comments, put it into that box, because then we can take that back to the wider project. We have a meeting fortnightly where we feedback information, and as we're going along, we can start adding these additional things. So if the buoys need to be larger, this is great feedback. Do they need to have certain things written on them or less things written on them? Would they work for you? Is there something we haven't looked at yet that you think, oh, that would be really useful for me as a recreational user on the water to better inform me? These are things we want to hear. You're the guys out on the water day in, day night, and we want to help you. But from an Our Ways perspective, we're very much for freedom of access. We want to, as boaters, continue exploring these beautiful places, but we've got to come to the realization that we've got to adopt best practice to continue doing that. We need to be more sustainable, and if we can do these small changes, then it's going to benefit us. Okay.
Thank you. Just quickly, Jules is doing a little bit of promotion for Sea Search, which is great to see. So if you want to get involved in any kind of mapping or monitoring, then check out her comment there. And Kaya, that's a really good point there you've made about standardisation. If you could also add that into the survey as well, that would be really great. Thank you.
All these comments you're putting in the chat, we'll obviously take those away, and the standardisation is definitely something we're looking at in terms of, the information panels as well, making sure no matter where you're going as a boater, you're seeing these similar messages. So that's definitely something the project is aware of, but having that reinforced is very helpful. So thank you.